Professor Medha Itiki and her colleagues for giving me this opportunity to share some of my thoughts about the genius, mathematical genius Srinivasa Ramanujan on this very birthday of Ramanujan. I consider a privilege to be next to you. And I'm also a bit embarrassed to hear some of the adjectives because some of them graciously presented for me, and especially in the presence of Ravinda and Anirudh. I'm really embarrassed to be called this and that and that. I'm not that, to be sure. Well, I cannot, to begin with, I cannot but recall my wonderful student days in the corridors of Central College. I got admitted to BSc Honours at the age of 17, long, long ago. And I did my 3-year honours in 1 year of MSc. Then I had wonderful teachers to be taught. I hope you heard some of the nice things I said so far. And I'm an alumni of Central College Mathematics Department, and I'm very proud to be so. And I got whatever foundation I got, and it was nice from that very corridors also, and from some of the great teachers. And BSc Honours in those days was offered, the course I was offered only Bangalore Central College, and it was a 3-year course, and we were not supposed to fail at all. If we failed in the course, we would go down the ladder by 3 years. And it was after 11 years of schooling and 2 years of intermediate course. So we were about a class of 30 students, and the students were very competitive. So it was a challenge. It was very challenging. And one of our senior teachers was Professor K. Venkatachalanga, a very versatile mathematician. And I should recall him. I think it's relevant to recall his contributions to the University of Mysore at that time. Bangalore University was just going to be bifurcated. And he was a pioneer in organizing the mathematical expos. As I saw, I was a volunteer myself in one of the expos, mathematical expos. He organized here, right in Central College. That was late 1950s. And he spent money from his own pocket and managed to find an intelligent carpenter and got several complex mathematical wooden models, and those became exhibits later when he organized the expos. And later I was a student, and I was at that time, and I was one of the volunteers in the exhibition. I forget the occasion. It was, I don't know, some jubilee of Central College at that time. And then I became his junior colleague, junior most colleague in Mysore. At the time, Bangalore University was bifurcated. And once again, he arranged an exhibition there. I forget the occasion again. And as a junior colleague, I volunteered. And I came to know that some of the exhibits he got made are in Central College, back in Central College Mathematics Department. If I'm right, Professor Medha would vouch for that. And pertinent to today's function also again, I would talk of Venkatachalanga again. He was a versatile mathematician, as I said, and especially he was an expert on Ramanujan. And he became famous after his retirement. He consolidated decades of, he was one of the pioneers again in India, as far as Indian mathematicians were concerned, to work on Ramanujan's mathematics. So after decades of research, intense research on Ramanujan's mathematics, he published a monograph titled Development of Elliptic Functions According to Ramanujan, and it was published by Madurai Kamaraj University. And I think it was in the year 1988, just 1 year after Ramanujan's centenary celebrations. And then one Sean Cooper of New Zealand, who is also an expert in Ramanujan, is quite young compared to some of us, and he sort of rewrote Venkatachalangar's monograph and expanded on that, and he titled that book as Development of Elliptic Functions According to Ramanujan and Venkatachalangar. And so that's the greatness of, I thought I should mention that. And as it happens, of course now several awards have been instituted in the name of Ramanujan, but some of these pioneers who worked on Ramanujan intensively were not one of those who received awards, because those are, I mean, before Ramanujan's birth centenary, very few people knew about Ramanujan. And I think it was in the year 2012, the 125th year of Ramanujan's birth, and incidentally, it was Professor Dr. Manmohan Singh, then Prime Minister of India, who declared today as National Mathematics Day, and thanks to persuasion of some of the National Board for Higher Mathematics people who persuaded Manmohan Singh, Dr. Manmohan Singh, to declare that, and so it became popular, and Manmohan Singh and engaged him. Of course, the purpose of declaring today as National Mathematics Day is to commemorate the achievements of Ramanujan and also assess the impact, ever-growing impact of Ramanujan's mathematics, how he was relevant then and even now, and probably he will be relevant in future. That is his mathematics. And so the credit goes to NBHM as well as Dr. Manmohan Singh. Dr. Manmohan Singh himself was a famous economist, and he knew the role of mathematics in almost all walks of life, especially in his own field, economics. As youngsters may or may not know, many Nobel laureates in economics are mathematicians. At least I can recall 2 or 3 of them. And we are supposed to, and I congratulate Professor Medha Itiki for arranging such a wonderful function. That's the purpose of celebrating Ramanujan's birthday across the colleges and universities of India, at least on that day. And talking of Ramanujan himself, it's a folklore now. All mothers, if not fathers, know about Ramanujan and the story of Ramanujan, and it is told and retold as epics are told and retold again and again, and they continue to be interesting, and probably there is something to learn when a story is retold, because many of you may or may not know, youngsters, about some of the details of Ramanujan's contributions. And his story is a sort of tragic comedy, as you may say. It's a tragic portrait and a happy part of it. And for one thing, he died too young at the age of 32. And he was born in a lower middle class, or poor, I should say, a poor family. And he sort of remained poor all his life. And he was college dropout. He didn't go beyond what is now a second year PUC. In those days it was called First Arts, something like that. Ironically, he failed. He failed and he couldn't go back to the college to continue to his education, college education. Ironically, because of his overindulgence in mathematics and he neglected other subjects like biology and other things, maybe sociology and things like that, which he was supposed to study and pass. And then last year, of course, as a consequence, he didn't have the advantage of talking to his teachers, and also he didn't have access to books because he wouldn't go to library, probably was out of bounds for him. And moreover, he was self-taught and he remained at home and worked for himself. And then so that's one part. And of course, last 3 years of his life was very tragic. He was in a sick bed and finally died. So that's the tragic part of his story. But yet Ramanujan left unfathomable mathematical treasure for future generations to dig and do research on. And so he was a precocious child. Between the age of 16 and, okay, he borrowed 2 books from some of his friends. One of them was called Loney's Trigonometry. It was a misnomer. It was actually a book on calculus. Ramanujan could just glance through pages and anticipate the contents of the book, most of it, and he rediscovered, worked through all the exercises, and also he was inspired by another book called Carr's Synopsis in Pure Mathematics. Carr was a tutor, and he tutored the students who wanted to write entrance examinations. And that synopsis just contained, it was only for Carr's private purpose. It contained only statements of theorems or results in various branches of mathematics, and Carr didn't give details because he could always prove the results in them. And Ramanujan sort of wrote his notebooks in the same lines as Carr, and between the age of 16 and 26, he sort of discovered and rediscovered thousands of results in various areas of mathematics, like continued fractions, infinite series, theta functions, and elliptic functions, and so on and so forth. And he had his own, he rediscovered many classical theories of Jacobi and Weierstrass, for instance. And then in his notebooks, he wrote down many new theorems in what we call alternate theories of elliptic and theta functions according to Ramanujan, and then the so-called modular equations and so on and so forth. And then once again, he just wrote down the statements of his discoveries and rediscoveries for a couple of reasons. One, he didn't have time to write down all the proofs because he was discovering more and more results all the time. So he had time only to write down the statements, as it were. And also he couldn't afford paper to write on. So there's a couple of reasons that we know. And then and these he wrote 3 notebooks, and they are known as Ramanujan. And I think in the 50th year of birth of Ramanujan, TIFR published those 3 notebooks. He compiled 3 notebooks in between the age of 16 and 26. And one of the popular chapters in these notebooks for college or high school or even middle school students is a chapter which he wrote at the age of 16. It's on magic squares. And so some of you may try to read that chapter. And of course, all these results in the 3 notebooks were later attended to, because GHRD, Cambridge mathematician, who was Ramanujan's mentor, asked some of his colleagues like Watson and Wilson or their names to go through the notebooks of Ramanujan and try to supply proofs or edit as he called. But then it was turned out to be a Himalayan task, and somewhere in 1970s, many years after Ramanujan's death, one Bruce Byrne of University of Illinois Urbana took that up, the task of continuing from where Hardy's colleagues left, and it took him several decades, surprisingly, to fill in all the proofs of those statements, thousands of statements contained in those 3 notebooks. And finally he published 5 books called Ramanujan's Notebooks. And of course he spent all his time, about decades, on those notebooks, and he was helped by many of his students and collaborators across the world in publishing, in filling out the proofs of all the statements Ramanujan had made, and was published by Springer for Law. And then once again, somewhere in late 1970s, one George Andrews of University of Pennsylvania State University of USA happened to be in Trinity College library where Ramanujan did his studies. He got his BA degree and also got recognized as fellow of Trinity College and fellow of Royal Society for his work he did with Hardy over 3 years of his stay in Cambridge University under the mentorship of supervision of Hardy. And Hardy had a welcome. And then this coming back to Andrews, Andrews sort of accidentally find some 100 loose sheets of paper in the library, and it so happened that it contained lots of once again lots of theorems in an area called Mach theta functions and partitions. Mach theta functions were Ramanujan's one discovery, and Ramanujan discovered them during his sick bed of 3 years, 2 years in England, running from one hospital to hospital because the doctors at that time couldn't recognize his sickness properly. So 3 years, first 3 years he had a good time, in the company of Hardy, but the other 2 years of his 5-year stay he was in sick bed, moving from one sanatorium to another, but he continued to do mathematics even though he was sick. And those 100 loose sheets, which George Andrews called lost notebooks, LOST, lost notebooks, because lost notebook, because that was known, that was not known to anybody, those hands, the scripts at that time. And then he worked on it for decades. He and Bruce Byrne and their students and collaborators, and they came up with 5 more books called Ramanujan's Lost Notebook. That's the treasure Ramanujan left during those 32 years of his life. And then the last letter, as it called, of a genius by one Ken Ono, another expert of lost words of this genius. Ken Ono, another expert, American expert on Ramanujan. This last letter was written by Ramanujan to his mentor. Ramanujan, last year of his life, he was in Madras. He had come back to India, and then a few weeks before he died, he didn't know he would die anyway. He wrote a cryptic letter to his mentor. It contained 17 or so, a dozen and a half formulae, Of course, Ramanujan gave a name for that. He rarely gave names for whatever he did, but in this last letter he said, I would call this Mach theta functions. And then Hardy, of course, he didn't have time, or he passed on that letter to some of his colleagues. And over decades, the lot of eminent mathematicians across the world worked on this few formulae that Ramanujan wrote in his last letter. A lot of research piled up, but they could not actually decode the content of the content of his last letter, because in the sense that they could not fit in those formulae into a proper theoretical setup, or so. But after many decades after Ramanujan died and piles of research output happened, one doctoral student of Holland, one of the universities in Holland, happened to do that. He was to uncover the mystery of that lot letter, and he could fill up all the gaps which others had missed, and the mathematicians later called those as, they gave a new terminology, Mach modular forms, and this Ramanujan perhaps thought that all his work was in pure mathematics. Probably he thought so. He was a pure mathematician. So, but then I can just recall one incident that George Andrews has narrated somewhere. George Andrews happened to be in Australia, in Canberra, I suppose, talking to a theoretical physicist, Rodney Baxter, empirically. And then Rodney Baxter was working on a certain kinetic theory of gas. PUC students would know the kinetic theory of certain gases, and he showed his results to the mathematician Hardy, Andrews. And then he asked Andrews whether his results can be rigorized, put on a stronger mathematical basis. And then Andrews suddenly said, lo and behold, all that you need is two of the identities which Ramanujan discovered during his days in India. And then they are called so-called Rogers-Ramanujan identities. It's like we have an infinite series of certain type called special functions. Just like you factorize a polynomial, you would factorize an infinite series into an infinite product. Factors out of factors. So it's just a pair of identities. They are called Rogers-Ramanujan identities because Rogers was a physicist, I suppose, who had discovered earlier. And then, so what Ramanujan did decades earlier, maybe six or seven decades earlier, suddenly found an application under the hands of Baxter. And similarly, the contents of Ramanujan's last letter, that is about Mach theta functions or Mach modular forms, have also applications. I can refer to the recent paper of one Canadian mathematician of Indian origin, Ramurthy. He has a paper in Ramanujan's newsletter. Of course, here is Ravinda who manned that newsletter for several years, and he would be a better person to talk about it. And he can talk about many biographers. He is a sort of biographer himself, And so he could fill in for all the gaps I left. You can keep asking him, and then similarly, this coming back to Ramurthy's paper, recent paper, I think it was written 4 or 5 years ago. He talks of applications of these contents of Ramanujan's deathbed letter. Actually, he was dying, and the letter he wrote was when he was dying in Madras. 1 full year he was in sort of deathbed with pain, suffering, and all that. And then they are applicable to, for instance, as the physicists have found out recently, string theory, so-called string theory, superstring theory. And superstring theory, physicists are hopeful that it's still, I think, they are still developing that. And when it's all done, the superstring theory would unify some of their sort of seemingly diametrically or opposite or mutually exclusive theories. So Ramanujan's contribution is there, and it is a 21st century thing. And then I think one Harvey of University of Chicago, to whom Ramurthy refers, he's a theoretical physicist, and in his one of his papers, Harvey deals with these applications of Mach modular functions on superstring theory again, and in the study of black holes. So that's the relevance of Ramanujan, who died a century ago, even today. And Ramanujan has been relevant all along. Hardy's mentor was, for example, is one of his first followers. And then there have been hundreds of followers throughout the world, mathematicians, famous and less famous. There's hundreds of doctoral theses have been written on Ramanujan's mathematics, and and it is a multiplying effect. You see, in Mysore University, our department itself, starting with Venkatachalanga, it's just multiplying and multiplying. Now the latest multiplication factor is due to our current our youngsters there, Vasuki, Adiga, and all that. They have done a lot of work on Ramanujan. And here again, Professor Mahadev Naika and his students have done a lot of work on Ramanujan's partitions and so on. And then books have been written. I've already mentioned about books. Bruce Punt has read many more books on the mathematics of Ramanujan, like Last Letters of Ramanujan, and then other kinds of books on Ramanujan's mathematics, his biography. There have been many biographies of Ramanujan. Of course, once again, I have to point out to Aravinda, he probably knows by heart the best of the biographies that I know. One by Robert Canigan. It's called Man Who Knew Infinity, which Aravinda has translated. He knows it by heart, I guess. And then he has written many more biographies, and he's going to write many more. So there have been many biographies, and so Ramanujan has been very relevant. And I talked of some of the applications of Ramanujan's mathematics even to this day. And this is not a very strange thing, as Vice Chancellor already pointed out. Mathematics is an ubiquitous presence in all walks of life. And there is a thing, and some people talk of pure mathematics and applied mathematics, but actually if at all there is a demarcation between the two, it's only a thin line. And what looks like a pure mathematics for the inventor himself may become suddenly applied somewhere else after centuries. For example, works of Galois, who died at the age of 19, and then centuries ago, and then work of Fermat, and then the work of Euler, who lived and died centuries ago, are applicable now. And they have given rise to many more stronger theories, if you would like to call it, or more sophisticated theories, which are more applicable, like Newton's calculus, which he sort of discovered or invented, whatever you say, for the sake of putting his mechanics on stronger footing, and that has grown big, like calculus of manifolds, which are used by physicists, and then Euler's calculus of variations, which is grown into control theory and optimization used by the aircraft engineers, aerospace engineers, and then works with Galva and oil and Fermat, etc. are used now in like security systems, your PIN code and bank, all those sort of things. And then for security purposes in military, there were things done 100 years ago, and those people didn't know that they would be applied now. See? So there is a thin line of demarcation, if any, between modern mathematics and classical mathematics. They can interchange their positions, and I can go on, and then of course you have Norbert Wiener, who was a mathematician of recent times, and if you take any modern gadget, like even if it's the latest version of your mobile or any television or anything at all, there is a loop in its circuitry called negative feedback loop, and that was and we owe that to Norbert Wiener, MIT mathematician of recent years, and he interacted with all. Norbert Wiener started as in younger days he wanted to become a zoologist or a botanist or something like that, and then he turned out to be a very powerful mathematician because he interacted with even surgeons, medical people in medical field, not to speak of mechanical engineers or electrical and so on. And he is known for cybernetics. It's the mathematics of electronics. And he was a versatile genius. Of course, the word genius should be used not for people, all kinds of people like me, but Norbert Wiener was a genius, and he unified several areas of mathematics and even humanities like economics, and his work on the so-called many-body problems is very famous. It unifies potential theory, economics, the market, stock market things, and so on and so forth. And this many-body problem was proposed by a botanist, actually. Botanist. So there is, as Vice Chancellor was pointing out, it's all pervasive, it's all interactive, and so on and so forth. And then I can talk of some electrical engineers who turned out to be very powerful mathematicians and who produced Fields medalists, like Raoul Bott, who was an electrical engineer, and some of his students got Fields medal. It's exclusively for mathematicians. And mathematicians, fortunately or unfortunately, are not awarded with the Nobel Prize. So and then there is a strong, very powerful mathematical theory called wavelet theory. It is used by seismologists and meteorologists and mathematicians, of course, electrical engineers, etc., etc. And one of the main components of that theory is called frames. There's some sort of loose basis of vector spaces. There's some counterpart of that in more sophisticated spaces. And this concept of frame, we should thank an electrical engineer. See, Arjun Duffin, who was my supervisor also back in Carnegie Mellon, he was also supervisor of the Nobel Prize winner, John Nash, undergraduate. So we don't distinguish between mathematicians or scientists or physicists. They can all interact, and even humanities, like in the case of economics, and botany or zoology, and your what you call sequencing of genes, DNA. That's highly mathematical, topological thing. So I can go on like this forever. Anyway, I think I should stop and leave the dais platform to our C.S. Ravinda, and you can throw all questions of all kinds to him. And I'm I'm sure being our style person itself, he will be ready with answers to all. And I once again thank Professor. I'm concluding. So thank you so much, and your colleagues for giving me this opportunity to blabber myself. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for the deeply insightful and inspiring lecture. We now move to the interaction session, providing students and faculty an opportunity to engage directly with Professor S. Bhargava, sir, through questions, reflections, and academic discussions. I encourage the participants to make the most of this rare opportunity.
Once again, the latest thing is, I forgot to mention. Some of these Ramanujan experts, there are many, and they are quite strong, powerful mathematicians of Europe and USA. Originally they intended to bring out. Hold on. Okay. So their intention was to bring out the Ramanujan encyclopedia, as they call it. Bruce Berndt, Andrews, Wono, and various others that I mentioned, and Alladi Krishnaswamy, and many more. There's dozens of them editors. They wanted to bring out Ramanujan's encyclopedia. It's still in the offing, and that's the latest thing. But they would like now, because they didn't. There are hundreds of articles written by dozens of experts on Ramanujan, and the lesser ones also. Now they have, because of some practical difficulty, they are bringing it out as a book. As a book, once again published by Springer Furlan. It's being composed. There are hundreds of articles being composed in Pondicherry, one of the publishers. So you can wait for that, and that would be very interesting. It will contain hundreds of very interesting articles about Ramanujan's life, Ramanujan's mathematics of all kinds. Say it's practical and encyclopedia. For some technical reason, they are not going to call it encyclopedia, and it will contain articles about people who influenced Ramanujan and who dedicated to Ramanujan's life and work, and so you can look forward to that. Professor Mehta can have them in your library, and all the colleges too. Thank you very much.
Thank you again, sir. So, any question and answers are invited from the faculty members and the students as well.
I direct them all to Arvind.
No, you're the director at the moment.
I'm the director and director. Yeah, if you have any questions, try to answer. Because some of you may have questions about taxi cab. Taxi cab number is something you all know. I'll tell you something about you may not know. And you all know that Ramanujan was in sick bed in England, and Hardy is mentor there. Of course, he didn't have any relatives there, and just couple of friends. So that was an additional suffering for him here. He was alone in the hospital. Once in a way, Hardy, his mentor, visited him in the hospital, and Hardy happened to ask Ramanujan about the taxi cab number, the registration number of the taxi. He came, Hardy came in to the, and then Ramanujan, all of you know that number, and also the story. Hardy said it was a very disinteresting number, but Ramanujan came up with quick answer that it's not an interesting number. Actually, and then he also said it's the smallest number which can be expressed in two ways in terms of sum of two cubes. And that was not just the story. And all of us, probably a lot of them thought that it was just one of those things which a goddess Namakal inspired him to say instantaneously. But that's not the case at all. There's a whole lot of work Ramanujan had done on the so-called Diophantine numbers and so on and so forth. And one of the articles in the forthcoming book on Ramanujan, the encyclopedia, contains an article about that Ramanujan, how deeply that number is involved. So it gets related to Andrew Weil also work on K theory or something. And then applications. It fits into a whole lot of theories, which famous mathematicians worked on. I'm answering a question which was not asked.
Yeah, but I think he wanted to ask some question.
Good afternoon, sir. So, amongst all the branches of mathematics, as a doctoral student of Medana, and who is lost in the ocean of finding topics for my synopsis, what inspired you?
Not complimentary.
What inspired you to dive into the works of Ramanujan, sir?
Actually, he introduced me to Ramanujan stuff, but then I didn't work on that at that moment. I was I digressed. Then when I came back to Mysore, and some of my students were interested, so I got into it. Thanks to Adiga and others. So they made me. And then I also thought I should continue from where Venkatachalangar had left and introduced me to. So I went back to what he was doing. It just happens.
Any questions?
I can mention about another biography, P.K. Srinivasan's. He was a high school teacher and he was very adventurous, very dedicated high school teacher, and one of Ramanujan's fans. And he wrote the first meaningful biography of Ramanujan. And there are two books published by one of the schools of Rama and where P.K. Srinivasan worked in Madras, Muttaya, some school, I forget the name. And I urge all the youngsters to read biographies of mathematicians and physicists and who else, where you get inspired by their biographies. Another unasked question answer. I think we thank everybody. If there are no other questions.